January 2018 update from India. Aquarius and Gemini are affected by Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter for most of the month. Very powerful Venus combustion at the beginning, Saturn-Mercury conjunction, full moon and new moon cycles. So check it out. Okay, so I'm doing the forecast for January 2018. A little late. I'm here in India, and I'm just getting my internet and whatnot set up. So I just wanted to get on this forecast for you. And 2018 started with this big stellium here in Libra of Mars and Jupiter. I talked about that in my 2018 forecast. By the way, if you haven't gotten the forecast, you should do it. Already, the first predictions for 2018 that I made have really come true. I said January 2nd through the 7th, there could be a lot of perhaps civil unrest, social unrest in your world and in the collective world, and we definitely saw Iranian protests. There's also here in India, there were big protests in Mumbai in India. We also saw explosive social eruption with the President of the United States and a book that just came out where, you know, our President Trump and Bannon, his chief advisor, have now blown up their Libra bromance is, needless to say, over, at least for the time being. Again, Mars, Jupiter, and Libra, I said it shows some explosive potential for relationships and a lot of potential for social unrest. So we already saw that January 2nd through the 7th, and we're still seeing the fallout from that. I'm recording this on January actually, I want it to be January 8th. This was January 7th. You can see exact, and then January 8th. This is in India time. You see, Jupiter is now defeating Mars in the planetary war. They're very close. I do the planetary war with the planet at the lowest ecliptic longitude. It seems to work for me. But regardless, we see that very close conjunction of Jupiter, Mars, and Libra starting off the year. So it's this sort of personal contentiousness, perhaps social contentiousness as well, fighting over social structures and how appreciated you're feeling, especially based on your principles and whatnot. But we also have some other really important shifts. Look at Sun and Venus are exact. Venus is on the exact opposite side of the Sun. So Venus is as far away from the Sun as it can be right now, which really compounds that problem of frustration with personal relationships and how we're being treated. When Venus is combust and direct, then it's all the way on the opposite side of the Sun. When it's combust and retrograde, then it's very close to the Sun. And Venus goes retrograde at the end of this year in the sign of Libra. Again, this is part of my 2018 forecast that you should get. But at this time, Venus is as far away from the Earth as it gets on the opposite side of the Sun. So again, we're feeling very frustrated with our relationships, and we're really noticing how we're not being appreciated by others, and we're ready to kind of cut ties, so to speak. Venus is also still pretty close to Saturn. Venus-Saturn were very close earlier in the year, and Mercury is now getting on an exact conjunction with Saturn as well. And in the next week or so, you'll see or actually the next few days, January 8, 9, 10, through the 12th, Mercury-Saturn will be exact as well. So this could show where you're kind of wanting to just sort of cut things and people out of your life that don't support you, or people who you don't feel like you can really speak with or that you can communicate with, wanting to just maybe even sort of cut them out of your life, at least for now. Put up a boundary. So it's big time for boundaries right now. All these planets join Saturn. Saturn is about boundaries, putting up boundaries. Big theme here at the beginning of 2018. And again, Venus-Sun is showing this combustion. When a planet is combust, we feel frustrated with it. And with Venus, it's because we're not being appreciated. We're not getting the respect that we deserve. People aren't being, if people aren't being polite and not at least as polite as they should be, or not, respecting and appreciating you as much as you feel like you should, which is maybe not even a very high standard. When Venus is combust, we can just go, okay, then the heck with it. Particularly since they're in Sagittarius, which is a fire sign, and it's about principle, and it's the principle of the thing. It's not just that you said this, it's the principle of the thing. You've said that many times. And you're just not, we just don't share the same philosophy, so I'm going to cut you out. Could be a lot of that right now. Again, you can see Venus on the opposite side of the sun, extremely combust. Mercury, very close to Saturn. Again, Venus and Mercury are the two planets we use to deal with each other. Mercury to listen, to speak, to think with intelligence, and to accommodate, at least accommodate other people's views. And Venus, the graciousness to yield and to appreciate others. So there could be some big issues now, particularly with Jupiter Mars still very close in Libra here at the beginning of January. This is January 8th. We'll run this forward by day. This is January 9th. See, Venus, Sun, almost exact. Mercury getting closer to Saturn. This is January 10th, January 11th, 12th. You still see it's all really quite close. If we go back, we can see here that on the 10th, Moon joins this stellium in Libra. 10th and 11th, the Moon is joined. So again, the 10th and 11th could expect maybe some more explosiveness around these social causes. Look in the world, January 10, 11, 12. Again, it also depends on where you live, because I'm in India now, and this is a chart for India. So January 11th is actually January 10th in the Western world, at least for much of it. This is a chart for January the 11th at 1:30 in the afternoon. That's actually January 10th at 1:30 a.m. in the other part of the world. So this is why these forecasts, depending on which part of the world you're in, are tricky. So January 10, 11, 12, we see the Moon join this Jupiter, Mars, and Libra. Whenever the Moon joins, you see an eruption. I wouldn't be surprised, January 10, 11, 12, if we see a re-eruption of the Iranian protests, because it's already been. Where did all the students go who were protesting? 10, 11, 12, watch and see if we don't get maybe a resurgence of these protests again, maybe even a resurgence of the protests in Mumbai in India. It was the lower caste that was protesting. Again, this is all about that Libra principle, that social principle of Libra. With Jupiter, Mars, and Libra in India, they had the lower caste, the untouchable caste, was protesting against the upper castes. So again, that's total Libra issue. Wouldn't be surprised if January 10th through the 12th we see a more social or a re-emergence of that. And again, this is Libra, which is about social interaction. And then after that, you see the Moon then is debilitated for a couple days. January 12, 13, 14. Again, maybe if you're in the West, it goes into the 15th. Again, so then the Moon is debilitated around that time, and we have these intense emotions, and maybe, wanting to put up our boundaries and, sort of paranoid, kind of lashing out, you might say. And that would be, let's say, from the 12th, 13th into the 14th. This is the middle of the day on the 14th in India. The Moon goes into Sagittarius, right? So then again, then the 14th, 15th, we're getting close to the new Moon. By that time, Venus and the Sun have moved into Capricorn, and we're getting ready for the new Moon in Capricorn, which will be on the 16th here in India, January 16th. It'll be, it'll take place on the, probably the 16th also in the West. But, 14, 15, 16, the Moon goes through Sagittarius, and it joins these fired up planets here. This is January 14. Moon joins Saturn. This is an intense time. Moon, Saturn, you're going to feel that sort of restriction. But again, it's the sign of Sagittarius again, which is about spiritual purpose, wanting to feel inspired, wanting to be, find your teachers. Moon's very close to Saturn, which is about isolation. Hopefully, a healthy solitude, a healthy isolation. But it can also be an unhealthy isolation and solitude where you feel depressed and grouchy. And this is often how we experience Saturn energy, because we don't spend time very well by ourselves. We want to be around others, and we cling to others, and we tend to feel lonely and isolated with Saturn energy. So you might feel that lonely isolation for, at least on like the 13th, 14th, 15th, as the moon goes through Sagittarius, joins Saturn. Then then it's almost the new moon, because as the moon gets darker and darker, we also tend to feel isolated and withdrawn, because the moon is very dark in the sky as it gets toward the new moon on Tuesday, and it's a new moon in Capricorn, so we're starting a Capricorn cycle on January 16th. Now we also have this important shift here on January 15th when the sun goes into Capricorn. This is what's called Makara Sankranti, which is the sun moving into Capricorn. Now it's celebrated when the sun goes into sidereal Capricorn. It's supposed to be celebrated on the winter solstice. It's a solstice celebration called the Return of the Light. And a couple thousand years ago, when the sun went into sidereal Capricorn, it coincided with the solstice. Now, 2,000 years later, and we pass through the Dark Ages, they keep celebrating it when the sun goes into sidereal Makara, when it's supposed to be on the solstice. So, either way, it's a celebration in India. It's also called Pongal and Makara Sankranti to celebrate the return of the light. So that'll be January 15th as well. But again, you want to understand, and I've done some videos recently on this false Makara Sankranti celebration. It's based on this forgetfulness about the zodiac. So the zodiacs it's a confusing issue, but no one should confuse. That doesn't mean we're supposed to use the tropical zodiac like they do in Western astrology, regardless of what some misguided Vedic astrologers say, that this is proof we're supposed to use tropical zodiac, is completely untrue. It's just proof that even now, priests and people lost an understanding of what was important about this celebration. It wasn't that the sun went into Makara, it was that it was the solstice. So that happens on January 15th. The sun moves into Capricorn, and then the next day, you see on January 16th, the moon is almost exact. When sun moon come together, we have that new moon, and the new moon will happen on January 16th. And that starts the Capricorn cycle, where we will be focusing on those Capricorn themes for the next 30 days, and that means wherever Capricorn falls in your chart, it'll also be an important focus for the next 30 days. So that'll be an important shift that day. And you see Jupiter Mars is about to move into Scorpio as well. Mars is at the very end of Libra at that time on January 16th. And Sun and Venus are still quite close, and it's a new moon day. So this is a big shift right here. Middle of January, January 16th. We should feel a big shift out of that kind of fired up Sagittarius, even Mars, Jupiter, Libra energy that I've been talking about, and more of a shift toward more like introspective, hopefully meditative, which is Capricorn, and focused energy also of Scorpio, because Mars is going to go into Scorpio. You see, by the next day, January 17th, Mars is now in Scorpio. Time for spiritual practice, literally facing your emotional weaknesses courageously. Here are all the birds. Facing your emotional weaknesses with courage. Be very important for the next 6 weeks or so as Mars goes through Scorpio. And again, this is also the beginning of that cycle in Capricorn. So again, big shift away from Libra, Sagittarius energy, which is, again, personal relationships, social relationships, also being driven by our beliefs and values, which is Sagittarius, spiritual values, and shifting into Capricorn, which is about concentrating our energy, focus our energy, and Scorpio, which is facing our inner insecurities and strengthening them. That'll be a big shift. But we also see, there's there's a strong Moon-Venus connection here also in Capricorn. It should be a bit of a relief, especially instead of being so fired up and self-righteous. That Capricorn energy, especially if we are authentically humble and spiritual people and trying to just kind of, face the truth, it could be a bit of a relief to not be so fired up and amped up and, sort of ratchet it up on the righteousness stuff. That gets draining. This is why we have shifts. It's why we don't everything doesn't stay the same. So again, I'm looking forward to that shift, January 16, 17, 18, as we get the new moon in Capricorn, and we also get the Moon-Venus, because Venus is also now in Capricorn for the next several weeks. Venus does a lot better in Capricorn, more grounded, less fiery. Of course, it's joined K2, which I'll talk about in a minute as well, but that shift should bring more introspection. Now, the quality of K2 here, K2 in Capricorn, is very much about focusing your energy on things that are eternal and truly practical, which is the practical fact behind your existence, which is you were born, you've incarnated to face the truth of who you are, and to be mature about that, which is Capricorn, rather than be a baby and want to just feel good all the time and then be all emotional when you're unhappy, which is the lower qualities of Cancer. K2 in Capricorn is to really bring out the higher qualities of Capricorn, which is to be mature about your life. Of course, it can bring the difficult side as well, which shows that you have to face these painful realities, that one day you're going to die, and it ultimately doesn't matter that much how much people like you. And I mean, it matters, but it's just a sort of wispy promise that we sort of chase the world of people and culture, and we don't face our true dilemma. So K2 in Capricorn is really trying to land that for us now. And so this big cycle of Capricorn, with the Sun in Capricorn, Venus in Capricorn, and this new moon, is really to try to bring us into that awareness. And again, because most of us live very shallow lives and we don't like to face these things, it can be hard. So again, people can say, oh, it's so hard, I feel so depressed and sad, no, when's it going to stop? That could be part of it. That's the entry point. That's the catalyst for your greatness. It's not an end in itself. It's just a feeling, and that feeling is there to awaken something truthful. Usually that feeling makes us want to then look outside of ourselves and try to find something to make us feel better, to make us feel happy. You can do that too, but looking within is much more supported now. And with Mars in Scorpio, you'll have the courage to look within as well. So you can see if we just run this forward, this will be a prominent theme. This is January 18. You see Mars is getting set up here. Jupiter's at the very end. Also, Jupiter's going to turn retrograde in a bit here, but you see these planets just keep moving along. This is now January 20th. You see Venus, Sun are still pretty close. K2, Saturn. K2, Venus, Sun. Mars is now set up there in Scorpio, Jupiter in Libra. So again, this period of time will be for us to be hopefully developing more emotional courage, discipline, strength. Again, Mercury is now separating from Saturn. So again, this Mercury-Saturn, which has been going on for the month, for most of this month, is really about getting practical and getting down to earth about your information as well, particularly like if you're a teacher or whatever kind of information inspires you. Information, Mercury, inspires you, Sagittarius. Getting serious and straight and focused on it, which is Saturn. So it's a very good time for that. If you're a teacher, if you're someone like me who, teaches or puts out information, it's a very good time for that, to get really practical and focused and narrow your focus to what's most important. Those are big things. That's been sort of prevalent the whole month of January so far, pretty much, at least since around the 7th or the 8th. But then we just see these themes continuing, and if we go forward, we'll see that, this is January 21st, and then we have the moon goes into or I should say, let me go back here to January 19th and 20th. You see there's this trinal aspect from Jupiter and the aspect from Saturn as well. So the 20th and 21st, see Saturn is aspecting the moon here, and Jupiter is also aspecting. So when you get these double aspects from Saturn and Jupiter, it can show a time to really move forward in your progress, your spiritual progress. So those will be good days, January 19th to 20th, 21st. Again, depends on if you're in the west or the east. But those days when moon is going through Aquarius, it's good for Saturn focus and commitment, and Jupiter inspiration and purpose. And then we see on the 22nd, 23rd, the moon is in, oh, I'm sorry, Mars is also aspecting at that time. So you've got a triple aspect, sorry. Saturn, 3rd house, Mars, 4th house, Jupiter, 5th house. 3 of those aspects, 3. Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter. So, 20th, 21st, or let's say, yeah, like 20, 21, into the 22nd. Great for your spiritual practices and showing up. Okay? So then the moon goes into Pisces, which is good for metaphysics, higher learning, relaxing into the great cosmic beyond, and also checking out, tuning out, escaping through drugs, alcohol, other kinds of impure means of escape. So you want to be aware of that. And then the 24th, we have this, especially the 20th, well, actually like the 25th, 26th, we have this aspect from Jupiter onto the moon in Aries. And you know, we could see, again, this could also show a kind of reemergence of some, maybe some social drama a little bit, with the moon going through Aries, aspected by Jupiter, and Mars being really powerful in Scorpio. This could be a time of, if not renewed social unrest, at least, you know, again, getting kind of fired up about things in your life. I wouldn't be surprised if it shows some, you know, some hostility and aggression in the world either. But then we have on the 26th, 27th, into the 28th, the moon goes through Taurus, where it's exalted. That's also aspected by this Mars opposite, which can show a nice contrast between the stability and emotional stability and structure of Taurus with the dynamic and the, you know, the dynamism of Mars in Scorpio. So again, you might see some, you know, potential, you know, power struggles with your partners and whatnot at the time. But it's all towards, you know, working through the dynamics so that it's not, you know, so that you can balance yourself and others. Both of these are strong. So what this means is that, you know, all Moon-Mars interactions aren't the same. We have an exalted moon interacting with a powerful Mars. So that's pretty dynamic, but the dynamic is to make both of them stronger and brings them both into full force. So you might see some explosive moments with your partners here on these days, on 26, 27, 28. And then 29, 30, well, now we're opposite Saturn, and we're also aspected by Jupiter. Oh, and Saturn and Mars again. Look at this. We have the 8th house, 5th house. So we have two signs now that are getting all 3 aspects. So Aquarius and Gemini are both getting all 3 aspects at the same time of Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter. Don't see that so often. See 3rd, 4th, and 5th house aspects. Also 7, 8, and 7 here. So it's the 7th house aspect of Saturn, it's the 8th house aspect of Mars, and it's the 5th house aspect of Jupiter when the moon goes into Gemini. So that should be also quite intense for your spiritual practices, for your speech and communication, just in general now. to just realize, anyone who has planets in Gemini and Aquarius, starting when Mars moves into Scorpio, you're going to have those two signs aspected by Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter. Then we just learned something. If you get Saturn followed by Mars and then Jupiter in a row, you're going to get two signs getting all three aspects. Pretty tricky and cool stuff, huh? So, in this transit, January 29 through 30, January 29, 30, with the moon in Gemini, it's a good day for, of course, figuring things out, exploring things, and people who have planets in Gemini are already getting this Saturn, Mars, Jupiter eruption. So you might feel that, in your mind and heart with a lot of force, because the moon will go through there at that time. And then on January 31st, the moon goes into Cancer, and it's getting ready for that full moon. It's actually the full moon day on the 31st. So we'll feel that harmonic tension between Capricorn and Cancer on January 31st. So that's a full moon day, and that could be pretty filled with drama as well. So this is January 2018 forecast. Hope this helped you. I know there are a lot of birds wanted to get their voices in as well, so hope that wasn't too distracting. But if you haven't got my 2018 forecast yet, it's free. Sign up for it. It's about an hour long, and I'll not only talk about the important transits for 2018 throughout the year, but also how the long Mars and Capricorn transit will affect you. Mars will be in Capricorn for 6 months starting in May. And you can also get daily forecasts at my member site, Astrology Training Lab, and see each day broken down by the Vedic Panchanga. So you can check that out as well.